Good morning and welcome to Western's Public Information webinar for the proposed 2015 rate adjustments for Pick-Sloan Missouri Basin Program Eastern Division and Loveland area projects. I'm Lyman, Public Affairs Specialist with Western Area Power Administration, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to inform you of the upcoming public process for the proposed Pick-Sloan Eastern Division and Loveland area projects 2015 firm power rates. Current Pick-Sloan Eastern Division Loveland area projects firm power rate schedules became effective January 1st, 2010 and expired December 31st, 2014. Western is seeking public comment from Western's customers, tribes, stakeholders, and the public at large. In early July, we expect to publish a Federal Register notice, which will begin a 30-day comment period. The Federal Register notice and all related material will be posted on the Upper Great Plains region and Rocky Mountain region websites. Information was included in the customer letter announcing the webinar. Before we begin, let's go over some logistics. Today's webinar will be recorded. All phones have been muted for this purpose. We'll do your questions at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question at any time by clicking on the chat button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. Be sure to send your question to Lisa Myman, host. If you've entered your audio PIN when you joined, you can raise your hand by clicking on the Raise Your Hand button, also located in your webinar control box. At the presentation, I will unmute your phone so you can ask the panel your question verbally. If you enter an audio PIN, you will not be able to ask your question over the phone. If you have difficulties during this webinar, we will be unable to assist you today. A recording of the webinar will be made available in about 1 week on the region's websites. We want the webinar to no more than 2 hours, but we have reserved the webinar until 12:30 p.m. Mountain Time, so if we need additional time, we have it. We have 2 speakers on the webinar today. The first, Sheila Cook, our rates manager for the Rocky Mountain region. Followed is Linda Katie Hoffman, our Great Plains region rates manager. The virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Sheila Cook, and I'm the rates manager for the Rocky Mountain region of Western in Loveland, Colorado. Our day is to provide you with information on the proposed 2015 firm power rate adjustment process for the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division and Loveland area project. To be consistent with the data presentation, both Linda and I will be going back and forth during the presentation discussing information pertaining to coinciding projects. I'll be discussing specific information pertaining to the Loveland area project, and we'll be discussing specific information pertaining to the Eastern Division. We're going to discuss why the rate process is needed, the charge components, the power payment studies for Pick-Sloan and Friar, the rate, process schedule and contact information, and we will move into the question and answer session. This rate process is required due to the fact that the current rates for both the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division and Loveland area projects expire on December 31st, 2014. The existing rates do not need to change because the overall rates are sufficient to recover costs. However, we are proposing a true-up to the base and dragger components. An adjustment to the base component can only be done through a formal public process. Why a minor rate process? To qualify for a minor rate process, the revenue requirement cannot change more than 1%. In this case, there will be no change whatsoever to the revenue requirements. In addition to the less than 1% change to the revenue requirement, the comment period for a minor adjustment is only 30 days versus 90 days required under a major rate process. The last bullet notes that no formal meetings are required. Western still wanted to perform an outreach to our customers. There we chose to try one of the new technologies available, specifically this WebEx, with our intention to have a forum for dialogue with our customers and at the same time mitigate the cost of having meetings in multiple locations. With this minor rate process with no change to the revenue requirements and all rates itself to this approach, and we respectfully request any feedback on how it works. Now we'll discuss the rate structure and charge components of both projects. This slide depicts how the rate structures work. As demonstrated by the two bubbles on the bottom of the slide, the Pick-Sloan Missouri Basin program and the Frying Pan Arkansas project are two separate projects that have separate power repayment studies. The Pick-Sloan project spreads its revenue requirement between the Eastern Division and the Western Division. The Eastern Division revenue requirement creates the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division rate, shown in the bubble on the top left. The Western Division revenue requirement, as shown in the red bubble, gets added to the Frying Pan Arkansas revenue requirement in purple, and the LAP rate, within the green bubble at the top right. Pick-Sloan Western Division were operationally and contractually integrated in 1989 to form the Loveland area project. Forward, it's important to keep this structure in mind to be clear whether we're talking the power payment study or the specific project rate. Now discuss the charge components of both projects. In January 2008, both Pick-Sloan Eastern Division and Loveland area projects published rate orders with revenue requirements identified by two components, a base component and a drought adder component. This concept was adopted to allow us to insulate the base component of the rate from the expenses brought on by drought periods. It was designed to be flexible enough to allow the drought component to go up while incurring drought expenses and go back down when those expenses had been repaid. The drought can be adjusted annually by up to 2 mills by a public process. The component can only be adjusted by a public process. It's important to note that even after the drought-related costs are repaid, there will still be a drought add component to the rate design. It must be just have $0 allocated to it until such time that we head back into a drought period and start accumulating drought costs again. Now we will get into the specifics of what costs are included in each component. First, the base rate is designed to cover annual operating expenses, O&M, investments, additions, and replacements to the system, interest on investment, inflationary costs, purchases associated with hydro generation operations, and transmission costs for firm deliveries. Onto that, we have the drought adder, which is designed to recover dollars associated with the drought, in purchase power and interest not yet paid on drought debt. It's important to note that each project's power repayment study solves for a single revenue requirement or composite rate. It covers costs from both components. Components were implemented in January 2008 as a way to articulate the costs associated with the present drought period. Now move on to discuss the specific charge components for each project. The Loveland area projects, the annual revenue requirement is $84.5 million. It's made up of revenue requirements from FryArk of $50.3 million and Pick-Sloan Western Division of $69.2 million. The adder component in effect right now is $33.3 million, and the base component is $51.2 million. Again, it's important to note that the drought adder component can be adjusted annually up to 2 mills or public process, and the base rate can only be adjusted through a public process. Now add the proposed annual revenue requirement to the slide. You'll see the proposed annual requirement is going to change. It remains at $84.5 million. However, the proposed drought adder is decreasing to $23.5 million due to drought costs for both Fry Arc and Pick-Sloan Western Division, increasing by a total of $9.8 million. The proposed base component is increasing by the same $9.8 million and now equals $61.0 million. This equates to a 28% revenue requirement coming from the drought adder and 72% coming from the base. It's important to note that the base and drought adder components have not been rebalanced since the rate was placed into effect in January of 2010. This is primarily attributed to repayment of drought deficits and the increase in O&M costs of both projects, which we'll cover in more detail later. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to Linda to discuss Pick-Sloan.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm Linda Katie Hoffman. I'm the rates manager from the Upper Great Plains Regional Office in Billings, Montana. I'm going to talk to you about the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division annual revenue requirement and the Pick-Sloan drought adder and base components. The Pick-Sloan Eastern Division rates are derived from an annual revenue requirement of $332.8 million. That's out into the two components Sheila discussed earlier, of drought adder component of $166.8 million, which, as she stated, may only be adjusted or may be adjusted annually by up to 2 mills by a formula or by a public process, and then a base rate component of $166 million, which may only be adjusted by a public process. Okay, now going to what the Eastern Division Pick-Sloan Missouri Basin programs proposed revenue requirements. As you can see, they're not changing. The proposed annual revenue requirement will remain at $332.8 million. The drought adder component is being reduced to $118.4 million, and base rate proposed component is going up to $214 million. Change results from where we had been at about a 50% component for the drought and a 50% component for the base rate to being shifted to the base is going up to about 65% of the annual revenue requirement, and drought components being reduced to about 35% of the annual revenue requirement. I'm going to talk a little bit about the power repayment study for Pick-Sloan, and Sheila will talk about the WAPA power repayment study. Remember, as this is the overall Pick-Sloan annual payment study, and a portion of the Pick-Sloan repayment study is recovered from the LAP customers in the Western Division of their rate that she discussed in the bubble charts earlier. The PRS, or power repayment study, is solving at the composite rate of $33.54. This has not changed since our rates went into effect January 1 of 2010. If you take this study and you strip out the costs associated with the drought component, what would be left would be the base component. Right now, the proposed base component for the power repayment study is solving at 21.71 mils of the 33.54 mil composite rate, and the drought component is the remaining 11.83 mils. Okay, the drought adder today is paying off in the 2019 in this study. 2013, the Pick-Sloan program made a $69.9 million payment for aid to irrigation for the Colorado Big Thompson, which was a required payment. We made a $37 million payment in 2013 toward drought costs. There is approximately $432 million left to be repaid for the drought that has occurred in the last drought period. Years 2017 and 2019 are large drought payments of approximately $187 million and $171 million that are coming due, and they are the pinch points in our study, which means for what's setting our rate at the 33.54 today. Notice there's a little star at the bottom of this that says that these are unaudited data, and that is because our audit is not complete, but we feel very confident with the data that's noted here. As earlier, our rates are still solving at the same level that was set back in 2010. Our drought adder, however, is going down. We've repaid about $411 million of the $843 million of drought expenses that we had incurred. We're paid ahead on the drought costs, which saves us interest going into the future, and we're making payments on drought costs that are due in 2016 today. Our base rate is increasing, and the reason for those increases is we have a new 5-year cost evaluation period in the rate. New investments and replacements for that same cost evaluation period are rolling in. We have new operation and maintenance expenses rolling in, and this includes new inflationary costs as well. Okay. What are we really talking about when we talk about a cost evaluation period? And it's really the difference between the last rate setting study and this rate setting study, and is highlighted in the green section on the slides. The cost evaluation period in the 2010 rate was the period of 2009 through 2013. Today, those are actual costs, so you can see it on the bottom bar that says actual costs. Those are historical costs in this new rate-setting study, with new cost evaluation period being pushed out from 2014 to 2019. In Pick-Sloan, we run a 100-year study, and we don't include inflationary costs out past this 5-year window that we're talking, and shown in the purple area off to the right. That shifted from the 2014 to 2018 period on out through, in the new study, it's the 2019 period on out. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the repayment of the drought deficit that we'd incurred. On this mountain chart, in the green, you will see that the rate-setting study from 2010 projected that we would have a $945 million deficit. That's the green peak in the center of this chart. We didn't really incur that much debt. We came out of the drought with approximately $843 million, which is the purple peak that shows in the center of the chart. I noted that when the rate was set, the water didn't come in quite as poorly as we had expected, which represents the drought expenses and the purchase power costs that didn't really materialize. The purple in the center of the screen, the lighter purple, represents the drought debt that has been paid in 2013, which is $37 million payment. Through 2013, we've repaid, as I stated earlier, $411 million of drought expenses, leaving $432 million left to be repaid. The dashed line represents the study, what the study is expecting for the repayment of the drought debt, which is planned to be repaid in the year 2019. Our rate of 33.54 mils has been stable for the last 5 years and is continuing to meet our repayment obligations. With current water projections, we expect to continue to hold the rate until all the drought debt is repaid in 2019, when the last payment is due. For 2019, notwithstanding any new drought costs, the balance of the drought adder would be paid off and the drought component would be equal to 0. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sheila so she can talk a little bit about the Fry-Arc study.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the Frying Pan, Arkansas Power Repayment Study. And as noted by the asterisk, it is unaudited data, but we do feel comfortable with the information we're presenting here today. The study is solving at the approved revenue requirement of $15.3 million. The base is now $15.3 million versus the current base of $15.1 million, a decrease of $200,000. 2034 is still the pinch point in the PRS, the original investment. Deficits are outstanding. And note that no deficits were actually taken for drought costs. This study does not include the majority of the costs related to the upcoming Mount Albert refurbishment project. So this is the drought and base changes for Fry Arc occurring. As I mentioned earlier, the drought adder is going to zero. There were deficits actually incurred as all the drought costs were paid on an annual basis. As discussed with Pick-Sloan, the base is increasing due to the new 5-year cost evaluation period with investments and replacements, the operation and maintenance expenses, and inflationary costs. Now transition to the proposed rate discussion. This slide shows the overall revenue requirement for the Loveland area projects, which is $84.5 million. Boxes are showing how rate design works to display separate charges for both capacity and energy per component, and the total firm capacity energy rates on the right. A total boxes which show the firm energy at $5.43 per kilowatt month and the firm energy rates of 20.71 mils per kilowatt hour not changing. It's just the rates are changing between the two components. This table lays out the actual and the proposed rates without the components. Again, showing each project's revenue requirement and the firm energy rate of 20.71 mils per kilowatt hour and the firm capacity rate of $5.43 per kilowatt month that you saw on the previous slide. The important thing to note is that this is a 0% change. I'll turn it back over to Linda.
Thank you, Sheila. If you look at the top of this slide, these are the proposed charge components for the Pick-Sloan, Missouri Basin Eastern Division. Noted earlier, the revenue requirement remaining at $332.8 million. And as stated in Sheila's slides, we've just broken out the firm capacity, energy, and firm peaking components into the base and drought adder components. Looking at the totals on the right, the capacity rate remains at $7.65 per kilowatt month. The energy rate remains at 19.5 mils per kilowatt hour. And our peaking rate remains at $6.90 per kilowatt month. Here is the summary of the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division rates, and what I'd like to highlight is the 0% changes shown in red over on the right. This is revenue requirements for the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division, both firm and firm peaking together, which makes the $332 million revenue requirement. Shown as the proposed effective rates for January 2015, there's no change from what had went into effect January 1 of 2010. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the public process schedule. Today, May 2nd, 2014, the webinar is in place of in-person meetings that we'd held in the past. Late June, early July, both Loveland area projects and Pick-Sloan Eastern Division will be publishing federal register notices that will have a 30-day comment period. That comment period will close 30 days after publication of the initial notice, and we will publish final federal registers, both one for Loveland area projects and one for the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division sometime in the fall. We're proposing around October. Once complete, the new rate schedules, which will remain pretty much the same, will go into effect in January 1 of 2015. The next slide is just a visual of what the public process schedule looks like. We're in our informal meetings over the left in May. We plan to publish 2 FRNs, or Federal Register Notices, one for Eastern Division and LAP, in the July time period. Final rates will be published in 2 Federal Register Notices sometime in October There'll be a 30-day period for those to become effective, and the new rates will go into effect January 1, 2015. This is some contact information for both the Pick-Sloan Eastern Division and the Loveland area projects. The materials from this webinar will be posted at the websites noted, one Eastern Division as well as one for the Loveland area projects. They are different websites. My contact information is listed over on the left, and Sheila's contact information is listed over on the right. If you have any questions or concerns about the presentation today, please contact one of us and we will get back to you. Oh, I thought there is a phone number error on my contact information. It should be 255-2920, so we'll correct that before it gets published on the web today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lisa Myman in our headquarters office to field questions.
Thank you, Sheila and Linda. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the webinar. In questions today is a panel comprised of Linda Katie Hoffman, Sheila Cook, Jody Sudhead, who is our Upper Great Plains Power Marketing Manager, Dave Meyer, our Rocky Mountain Region Power Marketing Manager, Gary Hoffman and Claire Douthit from Western's Office of General Counsel. As a reminder, you can ask this panel questions in two ways. You can submit a question by clicking on the chat button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. Be sure your question is sent to Lisa Myman, host. If you've entered your audio PIN at the beginning of the webinar, you can also ask your question over the phone. Click the raise hand icon also in the webinar control box, and I will unmute your phone so you can ask your question verbally. We'll start with the written questions. Okay. No written questions. Take a quick to see if anybody's hands are raised. There do appear to be any questions at this moment. Okay. Well, we'll wrap up today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. Goodbye.